Day 44 to 11:24 a.m. Mount Malabito, Mamuyao, Rizal. Northwest foot of Mount Malabito, it was the part where the Agos River and the mountain met. At a wide clearing by the riverside, a huge reddish-black lizard and several people could be seen. They were of course Mark's group together with the children that escaped from the place where the manifestation of the miasma appeared. Unfortunately, the attack Chaflar made really took a huge toll on it and it was not able to fly towards the base directly. There was also the issue where there were too many people riding on its back and it had to carefully fly since the children were not used to it. Its master would surely give it a beating if any of them accidentally fell. In the end, the poor dragon could only reach the other side of the mountain where the base was located before it landed. In any case, it was enough for them to be safe from the miasma. Still, Colleen, Amihan and Edsel were all worried for Mark. They wanted to help but they knew that they would just hold him back. It was not that they want to escape but they had to. Will boss be fine from that thing? Edsel could not help but voice his worry as he gazed towards the northwest direction. He was not really asking anyone and was not expecting for anyone to answer him. The feeling they all had as they gazed at that monster was terrifying. It was as if they were going to be swallowed whole by the darkness and lose their minds. Even now, the younger children were shivering from the aura that the monster had and that was the reason they were too behaved while riding of Chaflar's back. It was not because they did not want to fall but more of they did not have the energy to fear about falling off. As for the children that were able to hold their fear in, they were still in remorse. After all, they had just lost everyone that took care of them in this past month. They all had no parents or guardians now and had no idea what to do next. The only thing that they could do now was to try to appease the other children. Colleen did the same and helped the children gather in a single area while trying to hush their cries. When she looked around, she saw Amihan and Miracle that stayed sitting on Chaflar's back while gazing towards the same direction as Edsel's. "You two shouldn't worry. Mark will be fine," she said, thinking what the thoughts of the two could be. Miracle turned towards her and Colleen was surprised that there was not a shred of worry on the little girl's face. "Father is fine." That was the entire thing the little girl said before she returned to gazing back at that direction. On the other hand, Amihan did not say anything and just looked down. She was already someone that was easily scared of things and she honestly felt like she was about to die when she saw that manifestation of miasma. As a naive spirit, she was highly sensitive to malice and she could feel that malice and animosity several times compared to people. Right now, she was trying hard to hold it in but her heart and mind was quivering fiercely. Still, despite how terrible she felt, she was still hoping that Mark was fine. "These girls are strong." Colleen smiled and looked at the children once more. Since Mark sent them this way, she knew that Mark decided to bring these children to the base. She could not do anything in that fight but in the least, she could protect these children. Especially, now, she stood up gazing at the other side of the river. "Carla, you felt them right. I'll leave those guys to you, so protect everyone." Saying that, she relaxed her mind and let Carla take over. Her appearance changed and a dark purple armor started to cover parts of her body. The nails on her hands turned into claws and her hair changed color and started to move as if being blown by the wind. Everyone was surprised at her sudden transformation and the children felt scared even more, but before anyone could say anything, she already dashed towards the river. That was then everyone noticed. There were several feral evolved animals creeping on the other side of the river while hiding behind the trees and bushes. Day 44 to 11:28 a.m. San Marcelino, General Nakar, Quezon. Almost half hour after the manifestation of the miasma appeared, Mark was still running towards the north following the Agos River. It had already been 10 minutes since he entered the forest filled with the red lichen in the surroundings, but he was yet to find the very source of all this mess. The shadowy figure was still on his tail, relentlessly chasing him. However, it was still within his calculations. Actually, he was maintaining a fixed distance between him and the enemy. The distance enabled him to dodge the attacks with allowance to save on his mental energy being consumed by his flash precognition. The main reason he was maintaining this distance was because he was using the manifestation as the radar to point the correct direction. It was because as he got closer and closer to the real body, the manifestation became angrier and angrier. It even roared more often. When he started to run in a different direction, the animosity the manifestation was releasing would also lower by a bit. With all those signs, he was able to pinpoint the correct direction to go. TCH. Mark clicked his tongue. The reinforcements arrived. He said those words as he started to detect contaminated beasts started to approach him from different directions. It seemed that it took them a while since they still had to gather from different places. However, since Mark rushed towards the right direction faster than the enemy anticipated, it could only throw the beasts towards Mark's direction without gathering in one place. I can take advantage of this. The beasts were all scattered and were approaching him individually rather than in groups. With that, he could deal with them one by one as he ran. However, it would also give the manifestation the opportunity to catch up. In that case, he would need to use his shadow mist movement more often and his mental energy consumption would increase several folds. What a pain! Mark vanished into black mist and rushed across the trees. The closest beast to intercept him was just several meters in front. A burst of miasma soon flew towards him, destroying the created subspace, forcing Mark out. As he was forced out, his body was horizontally on the air, but he was already by the side of the contaminated beast that looked like a wildcat with his left needle launcher aimed at it. Swoosh! The poisonous needle was launched, hitting the contaminated beast on its temple. It caused the beast that amidst its charge to slide several feet through the red lichen-covered forest floor. Mark's body started to fall, but it was late to just regain balance and run. He stretched out his left foot towards then ground, trying to land. Flash! Before his foot touched the red lichen-covered ground, a flash appeared at the sole of his shoes, which made contact with the ground first and immediately spread out, burning all the red lichen on the place where his foot landed. However, the momentum of his fall was too strong and he still fell. In the last moment, he stretched out his left arm. Flash! Another flash of light burned the ground where his palm landed and he was able to do a one-handed side flip. He then spun his body and landed with another 2 flashes of light and continued running with the circle of light surrounding his feet. The contaminated beasts came at him from the front and sides while the manifestation continued attacking from behind. Roars of both the beasts and manifestation echoed inside the forest. Soon, he suddenly saw an odd clearing in the middle of the forest. It was not a place where trees and plants did not grow, but rather, the trees and plants were mowed down. He then noticed some metal debris scattered around as he ran. Bingo! Mark's eyes lit up. He finally found the site of the crash. Ignoring the incoming enemies, he followed the trail of fallen trees. He ran as fast as possible while being careful of not tripping on the trees and soon found the crash site. It was under an oddly large acacia tree. When Mark saw the tree, his eyes became wide that he even ignored the appearance of the mangled plane. This acacia tree was surely not a normal one. He could feel magical energy emanating from the tree, although it was faint due to the miasma. Mark could tell that it might be the same as the tree Amihan used as her house before she was affected by Mutagen, a tree that served as a dwelling of a spirit or elemental creature. Still, the tree was almost withered and all its leaves had already had a sickly yellow color. However, that was not the issue. Just in front of the wreckage seemed to be a primeval altar with skulls and stones carved with strange symbols. But that was not still the real issue. What Mark made wide-eyed was the 3-meter diameter pulsating ball of flesh surrounding the trunk of the acacia tree. Swelling veins could be seen on the ball along with the same red lichen that covered the forest floor. Also on the ball of disgusting flesh, parts of both humans and animals could be seen protruded outside its surface. There were human hands and feet, hooves of a cow, limbs and wings of birds, and even heads. Along with its horrendous appearance, the rotten stench it was emanating made Mark feel like vomiting. The smell not only permeated in his nose but could be said that it was affecting his mind directly. Without further ado, Mark's eyes turned sharp. He aimed his needle launcher towards the ball of flesh. Swoosh! A poisonous needle was launched. However, a figure swooped in front, blocking the needle. The figure soon collapsed, after which was actually one of the contaminated beasts. Mark ran to the side and avoided several bursts of miasma from behind and shot one needle after another. Unfortunately, this needle launcher was not fully automatic and the firing rate was rather slower than his previous one. Still, the speed that the needles flew should be faster than needed. However, each needle was blocked by animals jumping one after another to become the meat shield of the ball of flesh. TCH. Then, let's see if you can block this. Click, click. The centerpiece of the shield, Defier, on his back detached and fell. He quickly caught it and pointed it at the ball of flesh. He rotated the mechanisms on the centerpiece, switching the needles to poisonous ones, and fired. The layers on the centerpiece opened and hundreds of holes appeared. With a push of the trigger, hundreds of poisonous needles flew out towards the ball of flesh. A deafening screech was let out by the manifestation as it rushed towards the ball of flesh. The whole shadowy figure entered the ball of flesh. FWWWOOM. A black whirlwind surrounded the ball of flesh, causing the needles to either change direction or fall to the ground. Damn it! Mark cursed and retreated as some of the black smoke blew towards him. I don't really want to do this, but I have no choice. Mark said as the three mental crystals he floated around his right wrist. He was all ready to activate the crystals when, the stones on the altar cracked and crumbled to powder. Black smoke flew out of the crumbled stones and seeped into the ball of flesh. Following that, an eerie laughter was heard. The ball of flesh distorted and contorted, forming an eerie 3-meter-tall face. While looking at Mark, who froze at the sudden situation, it spoke in a strange language. I was did disturb and I hadst to hasten mine own awakening. Nay, bother, I did see something interesting. Thee son of human, what art thee? Day 44 to 11:41 a.m. San Marcelino, General Nakar, Quezon. The ball of flesh became a terrifying-looking face of what seemed to be a man in his prime. It could be said that following the shape, the face could be complimented as good-looking. However, what made up the whole face was what made it terrifying. Its eyeballs were made of countless sets of eyes that belonged to different creatures, whether it was human, animal, or insect. The nose, lips, mouth and ears were the same, clustered parts of the same sense organ belonging to different species of creatures. Anyone with excessive trypophobia would surely faint from the sight of this creature. Mark was shocked at the unexpected situation. Although he expected to encounter some supernatural creature, he did not expect something like this. As he felt when the contaminated beasts attacked, he expected something like a sylph that became evil, and Amihan confirmed it herself. This in front of him, however, was totally a different thing. There was no sign of it being a spirit before it all. Furthermore, it said that it had just awakened. It was very likely that it was not the one that controlled the contaminated beasts. Mark could not help but take the possibility that there was more than one enemy. Due to these thoughts, rather than replying to the creature's question, Mark raised his guard further instead. What insolence! This deity asking thee a questioneth. Whoosh! The large face on the acacia tree spoke. All the mouths that composed its lips opened and closed at the same time as it spoke, creating a hair-raising sight. Seeing that Mark was not answering, the creature was obviously displeased. A strong gale blew towards Mark, forcing him to take several steps back, and the centerpiece of Defier fell from his hands. Mark endured the blowing wind and glared at the creature. I have no need to answer you. Mark pointed his right palm that had yet to fully heal towards the creature, and two of the three crystals floating around his arm shined. Take this. THOOM. Crackle. A beam of light and a staccato lightning surged towards the creature while intertwining each other. Boom. An explosion occurred as the two attacks Mark released at the same time reached the creature. Dust, dirt, broken wood and the red lichen that covered the forest floor was thrown around the surroundings. The explosion caused the visibility around the acacia tree to drop due to smoke and dust. However, swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. More than a dozen surges of miasma flew out of the smoke and dust towards Mark. His eyes shined violet and he dodged the attacks. Still, different from before where the attacks just flew off after missing him, these surges of miasma curved and turned, evading the trees and obstacles in the surroundings and chased towards Mark once more. Without a choice, Mark started to run around the huge tree as he dodged the surges of miasma. He ran around the trees, over the bushes and jumped up the trees on the way. Due to his irregular movements, the surges of miasma reduced one by one as they hit the obstacles. Ho! Thee hast some abilities, thee not? The 3-meter face's eerie voice echoed with amusement. Alloweth me trieth thee a dram myrrh. For the first time in years, Mark felt humiliated despite his trade as a mutator. This, whatever of a creature this was actually using him for amusement. It seemed to find Mark being able to dodge the incoming attacks amusing. Even though there was a screen of smoke of dust from the explosion, it seemed that it had no problem seeing Mark as it moved its face around the trunk of the tree following Mark's movements. Wind blew around the tree dispersing the smoke and dust which revealed the one attacking Mark. He could not help but frown. The surges of miasma did not directly come from the face but the one flying beside it. It was a small girl with wings and clothes that seemed to be made with leaves and flowers. The small girl was emitting the same presence as Amihan. In short, she was another sylph. Compared to the 3-meter face, the several inches tall girl seemed to contrasting in size. However, Mark frowned as she saw the sylph. Her head hung down while her body was emanating miasma. Furthermore, Mark could not detect any sign of consciousness from the sylph although she seemed to be alive. The sylph raised her head and turned towards Mark. Her eyes were all black despite not being hollow. Kree! She released a deafening shriek unbefitting her size. At the same time, the feeling of animosity attacked his subconscious. It was the same animosity that he felt from the manifestation of miasma. For sure, the one that controlled that miasma and the contaminated animals was this sylph. The shriek was too loud that Mark felt that his head was shaken and his eardrums would burst. As Mark was frozen due to the aftereffects of that shriek and the surge of negative emotional energy, the sylph flew forwards while sending uncountable surges of miasma from her body. Well, *T. I'm not that good in bullet hell games. Mark could not help but curse as he saw the surges of miasma coming his way. He shook his head and tried to resist the pain in his head. He then activated his flash precognition, as much as he could. However, the attacks were just too many that even the prediction lines in his eyes began to confuse his mind. Damn it! Mark jumped back, dodging the attacks closest to him. Fortunately, the attacks did not seem to be the homing ones. Perhaps, this number of attacks was hard to control even for the sylph and the huge head. Still, the surges of miasma was still too many to count. Swoosh! Swoosh! Swooshing sounds could be heard by his ears as he tried to dodge all the attacks with minimum margin as much as possible. If he did larger movements as he dodged, it was more likely that he would get hit as soon as the next attacks arrived. It can't be helped. I'll just bear the pain later. Mark murmured as his eyes turned sharper. Badump, Badump. His herd started to pump faster as he stimulated his mind and controlled his blood inside his body. His adrenal glands started to function in its utmost potential. Large amounts of adrenaline was distributed to his limbs and head, causing his movements to become faster and the scene in front of him became slower in his eyes and mind. He started dodging the attacks and even started to counter-attack with his needles. Unfortunately, none of the attacks hit both the sylph and the gigantic head. They were being protected by a barrier of wind that rendered his attacks useless. Damn it! Mark was in a dilemma. This was totally a one-sided battle. Although he was not really regretting coming here since it was needed, but still, the situation was frustrating. Mark panted as he desperately maneuvered around the surrounding trees, using the trees as shield to reduce the attacks that were coming his way. How about escaping? It was even more impossible. The moment that the sylph appeared, the surrounding areas were locked down by miasma. A tall wall of miasma bellowed around the area, leaving about 20 meters around the acacia tree vacant. Not to mention that a lot of the remaining contaminated animals surrounded the tree to serve as meat shield. Ha 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 ha. Most wondrous. Most wondrous. I never did expect yondum erdle liketh couldst still avoideth such number of attacks. I'm itching to knoweth how longeth can thee lasteth. While dodging the attacks, Mark heard the frustrating laugh and voice. The feeling of being toyed with was really bad. Too bad that the negative energies he was absorbing since earlier started to corrode his consciousness. Drip. Drip. It started raining. Rumble. Sounds of thunder echoed as the flash of lightning flickered in the sky. On Mark's arm, the third crystal shone its brightest for the first time since Mark acquired it. The Stormcaller mental crystal was finally activated. The sudden rain seemed to have surprised the eerie creature as it tried to gaze at the sky. It managed to see the already swirling clouds in the sky at the gaps of the leaves and branches of the dying acacia tree. The hath kept surprising this deity. To bethink yond the eke haseth the ability similar to the kings of the float. Fascinating. Showeth this deity everything thee haseth, ha 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 ha. Kree. The gigantic face laughed in fascination. At the same time, shriek from the sylph that could be heard through the soul hit Mark's consciousness. The mental attack made Mark stagger. He almost fell to the ground as he clutched his head. Unexpectedly, without him controlling it, his eyes glowed with violet color. It was not the bright one but a deep and dark one. It was just 1 second that the deep violet color flashed in his eyes, but it felt like a long time. In that second, his head hanged low. Scenes flashed in his eyes like a rotating wheel. However, none of the scenes were his. It was still not the time for him to die after all. May and his daughters were waiting for him. Mark then raised his head. He was smiling sinisterly. His eyes were all red and were even glowing despite he was not using his empathic ability. It seemed that the emotions, the animosity he absorbed all this time, consumed a part of his rationality. He glared at the gigantic face on the trunk of the acacia tree, laughing. Ha 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 ha. Deity here, deity there, I'm not here for your amusement, you lowly demon born from miasma. The slicer and divider blades launched from his back, which was caught by his hands. His right hand was still not fully healed due to the miasma and should still be painful, but he could not feel it anymore. Burst. 6 whips made of blood burst out of Mark's body and started to change shapes. The outer layer of the blood whips metallized and hardened and turned into something similar to the exoskeleton on the legs of beetles. The ends of the blood whips were sharp and pointed like spears. As the transformation finished, all the metallized limbs pointed at the face as Mark lowered his body to the ground and was growling like a beast. Who is it? Who is art thee? All those yond knoweth mine own birth wast all eliminated. It seemed that its origin being known by Mark made the creature lose its composure. Grr. I have no need to answer your question, die without knowing it. Mark kicked the ground, rushing towards the face. The bursts of miasma continued to rain towards him, but for some reason, they were slower and some were even curving away from Mark. The bootless wretch. The face glared at the sylph, who seemed to be struggling. With all its anger, the face opened its countless mouths and blew a ball of miasma towards the sylph, sending it flying away. Then, the miasma the face released covered the animals surrounding the tree. The bald contaminated beasts that were now covered in miasma turned towards Mark with their glowing red eyes. They started to rush towards Mark to intercept his charge. At the same time, the demon sent several surges of miasma towards Mark. Swish. Mark waved his blades and the metal limbs moved, piercing and slicing all the incoming animals. Bam! As Mark was about to hit by a surge of miasma, he jumped and kicked the head of an incoming beast, propelling his body upwards. The attack that was about to hit him missed, but since he was in the air, more surges of miasma flew towards him. Instead of shielding himself, Mark glared at the face and smiled like a madman. He then threw the slicer forward. Rumble. Crash. A wall of lightning shot from the sky which used the slicer as conductor. The strengthened lightning spread out, blocking the surge of miasma. Mark then grabbed the falling slicer as he charged once more. The 3 mental crystals that should have been rotating on his right arm was now rotating around his body while glowing brightly. Day 44 to 11:52 a.m. San Marcelino, General Nakar, Quezon. Mark glared at the demon as he continued to charge forward. The 3 mental crystals also continued to exude the brightest light it could while the crystals rotated around his body. Swoosh. Thoom. Rumble. Different sounds echoed around the place as the demon blew miasma towards Mark, and every single time, a strike of lightning blocked the attack. At the same time, Mark waved his blades towards the contaminated beasts that rushed towards him. Shoosh. As Mark swung his blades towards 2 evolved monkeys while evading the other animals, a fast shadow rushed towards him from behind. Mark noticed the shadow and tried to retract his attacks towards the monkeys, but the shadow was faster. The shadow jumped towards Mark, targeting his neck. Chomp. Clang. One of the metal limbs controlled by the blood whips blocked the mouth of the assailant. It was bald like the other contaminated animals, but by the shape of its ears and its large circular eyes, it was possible that it was a wild leopard cat. Knowing that the attack failed, the leopard cat tried let go of the metal limb and retreat, but before it was able to burst, the other metal limbs sliced its body to pieces, causing its flesh and blood to scatter behind Mark. Shing. Swoosh. The metal limbs behind Mark started to move faster and faster as more contaminated animals tried to surround Mark. Since the blades of the limbs had not poison from ivy, Mark could only deal with the contaminated beasts by decapitating their heads and dismembering their limbs. Despite that, they were still alive, but at least, they were immobilized indefinitely. Nevertheless, the contaminated beasts were slowing Mark's charge. Not only was that, but the contaminated beasts were getting stronger and stronger for some reason. Halt thy resistance, T is futile. I pity yond this Timoth hadst to endeth anon. I can't allow with anyone who I esset kneweth of mine own, Riggins liveth, falleth dead. As it saw Mark struggle with the contaminated beasts it controlled, the demon spoke with its strange language that was almost impossible to understand. However, Mark knew that it wanted to end things now. Not only Mark was in dire straits, but the demon also seemed so. Mark had already noticed it from the start, but aside from talking, the only things that this demon could do was attack him with miasma and send the contaminated beasts to block him. In other words, it was nothing but a sitting duck under that dying acacia tree. That was why the demon was doing its best to halt Mark's charge while maintaining its facade. Another thing that Mark noticed was that this demon should have been even more powerful, but it was obviously weakened. It might be due to the fact that it had just awakened as it said before, and it was awakened rather prematurely. He should take advantage of it and kill it before it recovered. It was not like he had any other choice anyway. The place was already surrounded by a wall of miasma, and the demon was keen on killing him. Cough. Cough. Mark coughed several times. For some reason, his breathing started to become heavier. His eyesight was even getting dimmer. Well **T. As he looked at the surroundings, he finally realized. The reason for the symptoms he was having and the contaminated beasts getting stronger was because the surroundings started to be filled with miasma. He did not realize soon, since he thought that it was just the residue from the blocked surges of miasma the demon hurled towards him, but the miasma in the air was getting thicker and started to form a faint fog. Mark looked around while fighting the contaminated beasts. He was trying to find a countermeasure. When his eyes landed on the face of the demon, however, he felt infuriated. The demon was smirking while looking down on him. However, at that moment, he noticed behind the demon a small flame was burning. It was there since the beginning, but no one noticed it due to the situation. From the explosion created when Mark attacked the demon earlier using the beam of light and the staccato lightning, some of the debris that flew behind the acacia tree continued to burn. Since the demon was facing Mark, it failed to see the flames and did not manage to extinguish it. Around the flames, the miasma was thinner. Mark's eyes glinted and a surge of lightning and high-temperature light surged at the surroundings. Due to the high temperature, the trees started to dry up and burn. The black fog that started to gather vanished and Mark's condition became better. The lowly Myrtle, the demon bellowed after seeing what happened. However, it was just the start. Rumble, crackle, rumble. Several lightning strikes landed in the surroundings, decimating the contaminated animals and setting more trees ablaze. As the fire started to spread, even the wall of miasma and the miasma the demon released started to weaken. Not only that, the movements of the remaining contaminated beasts started to become sluggish. I should have thought of this sooner. Mark tried striking the acacia tree with lightning, but the acacia, despite its dying state, was not normal and immediately dispersed the lightning strike. Nevertheless, Mark now had the opportunity to attack. The contaminated beasts could not attack him as fiercely as before and he managed to charge forwards easier. The demon still sent surges of miasma towards him, but he managed to thwart the miasma with just a surge of high-temperature light. At the same time, however, the crystals started to dim. Mark was running out of time. Luckily, it should be over soon. He stood in front of the face, pointing his blades towards the demon. "Thee bethink thee can killeth me?" the demon said with an amusing tone. "It's hard to understand what you are saying. Just die," Mark said in frustration as he pierced the metal limbs towards the flesh that made up the demon's disgusting face. As he did that, Mark frowned. He could feel that the metal limbs and his blood whips were being corroded by miasma inside the flesh, but he could not bother about it. Flash! Flash! He surrounded the blood whip with high-temperature light inside the body of the flesh. Gruua! With the disgusting smell of burning rotten flesh, the demon bellowed in pain. At the same time, blades made of blood metal rampaged inside the flesh body and started to cut the body into pieces. Sweat dripped from Mark's forehead as he kept several abilities working at the same time. There was also the deafening roar from the demon that could even reverberate inside his mind, which he tried so hard to resist. The three crystals finally lost its shine as the last of the energy in the crystals were used up. It would surely take quite a while before he could use these crystals again. And finally, despite the huge resistance, the final cut was made and the disgusting ball of flesh was no more. The roars of the demon and the miasma finally vanished. Mark turned towards the remaining contaminated animals and rushed towards them. He started killing them one by one and now, they finally stopped moving. Mark could not detect any sign that the animals would move once more. The rain clouds and the lightning strikes started to disperse with the loss of the energy to maintain them. Still, the forest was burning. Of course, it was a good thing and Mark had no reason or any way to stop the fire. The rest of the wide forest was still covered with red lichen after all. Even though the demon was gone, the red lichen could still contaminate the river even more if left alone. It was strange that the acacia tree was not affected by the flames, but at least Mark had a place to pass time until the fire was gone. He wanted to rest. He was tired both physically and mentally. His mental energy was drained to dangerous levels and his mind was affected by the malice the demon had. There was also the painful backlash from using his adrenaline more than how much his body could handle. Mark moved at the altar under the acacia tree to look at it. The demon came from this altar after all. He wanted to check on it before resting. Then, Mark suddenly retreated. He felt a strong deathly aura. Nevertheless, he was late. After the fight, his movements were all sluggish. The altar combusted and released huge amounts of miasma. Even the amount of miasma the demon released earlier could not compare to this. As the miasma surged out of the altar, it all rushed towards Mark like a tidal wave. He was covered in miasma. Weakened, he was not able to make even an ounce of resistance. His eyes started to grow heavy. Soon, he blanked out. Day 44 to 1:14 p.m. San Marcelino, General Nicar, Quezon. Above the burning forest, a silhouette of a large flying lizard could be seen flapping its bat-like wings. On the back of the silhouette, a young man, a woman, a 3-year-old child and a small lady with wings could be seen. They were all stared down at the burning forest with worry in their faces while they seemed to be looking for something. It was Chaflar and the rest of Mark's group that returned after delivering the children to the base. Despite hurrying as much as possible, they still took a lot of time. Not like anyone was at fault. They had to travel around mountains while maintaining a lower height due to the children. There was also the thick smoke above the forest which made it harder for them to traverse the airspace above the forest. Using the link of Chaflar, Miracle and the other blood children to Mark, they were looking for him. Nevertheless, even the mostly emotionless Miracle that only showed her emotions around her father was worried. With that look, Colleen and Edsel knew that something bad might have happened. Even the blood children were too restless that they could not be kept inside their canisters. They forced the canisters open and tried to rush towards a certain direction. If not for Miracle forcing them to behave, they might have fallen from Chaflar's back already. After a long flight, everyone saw a strange sight. The fire that spread around the forest was strong and the smoke was thick enough to suffocate anyone. Even the evolved animals living outside the forest were alarmed and started to evacuate. Nevertheless, amidst the burning forest, a huge acacia tree stood tall despite its sickly-looking leaves. The trees around it had already turned into charcoal and dust, but it seemed to be unaffected. A spirit tree. Emihan could not help but yell in surprise. The others were confused about it, but no one asked a question. Chaflar was heading towards the direction of the tree and Miracle, along with the blood children, was looking at the same direction. For sure, Mark was within the vicinity around that tree. Soon, they reached the clearing around the tree and Chaflar landed. Despite the almost scalding temperature in the surroundings, everyone went down. Miracle immediately dashed towards the acacia tree and everyone followed behind her in a hurry. They saw the remains of the fight and could not help but feel fear. Dozens upon dozens of dead contaminated beasts littered the area. Parts of the ground turned black after being hit by surges of miasma. There were also the chunks of rotting flesh from the remains of the ball of flesh. It was then that they saw Mark. Miracle and the blood children tried to rush towards him, but "Stop! Don't come close to him," Emihan bellowed in panic, forcing them to stop. Everyone looked at the little sylph only to see her tearing up. She gazed at Mark and carefully approached him. Mark was lying unconscious in front of a strange altar. His skin was turned black and his clothes were corroded. A dark aura emanated from his body that was releasing a sense of danger to anyone. "Emihan, what happened to him? You know it, right?" Colleen asked Emihan. She tried to retain her calm, but there were tears on the corner of her eyes. These signs, Emihan lowered herself to the ground. "My lord, a demon is trying to possess his body." Day 44 to 1:20 p.m. San Marcelino, General Nakar, Quezon. Everyone gathered around Mark, but no one tried to touch him due to Amihan's warning. Despite being unconscious, they could see Mark trashing around, gritting his teeth, and was releasing a faint growl from his mouth. His forehead was heavily frowning. From these signs, it was obvious that he was in deep pain. "Emihan, you said it's possession. Can we do anything aside from watching him suffer like this?" Colleen asked while feeling helpless as she watched Mark suffer. However, she did not receive any reply. She turned to Emihan just to see her standing in front of a weird altar-like contraption under the acacia tree. Colleen walked towards the altar to take a look at it and she saw Emihan. She was crying. Finally, Colleen heard the little sylph's reply. I don't know. What my lord is undergoing is not just some normal possession," Emihan said as she tried to wipe her tears with her arm. "This altar, I heard of it before. What is trying to possess my lord is not just some evil spirit or a normal demon." "What do you mean?" Colleen asked with further worry. The conversation of the two immediately caught the attention of Edsel and Miracle. Emihan turned to look at Mark and the black smoke emanating from his body and answered. "When other spirits that are capable of trying to possess someone, specifically a human, the disparity between the vessel's body, soul and mind will hinder the foreign entity to some extent. When the possession succeeded, he one that possessed the person would not be able to control the body to the full extent and ends up having strange movements, growling, and at worst cases, they end up not being able to stand at all. It also applies to normal demons. It is because they could only possess the body and not the soul. If that was the possession my lord is undergoing, he should be fine afterward, but what? The one trying to possess my lord is not a normal demon. If I'm correct, it's a strong demon born of miasma. In the worst case, it might even be the demon sealed thousands of years ago. What are you saying? How are you sure of that? Colleen started to panic. Her voice even started to rise. Miss Colleen, calm down. Look at Miss Amihan before going hysterical. Edsel hurriedly tried to intervene and forced Colleen to calm down. His voice made Colleen look straight at Amihan. The little sylph was biting her lip that had almost bled. She was even shivering. Compared to everyone here, she was the one with the weakest mentality. Yet, she was trying her best to keep as calm as possible. She was crying but still answered Colleen's questions. What Colleen did was just plain unreasonable. I'm sorry. Colleen apologized and Amihan shook her head. It's fine. Amihan then turned to the altar. This altar looks like something that is used to seal a formless demon. A demon born of miasma. They are demons that are not too strong at first but grows by absorbing negative energy. Also, even though they are not immortal, they are very hard to destroy. Their kind had no bodies, so they always try to possess people and take over their bodies. But since they had no bodies in the first place, it became easier for them to adapt to the human body they possessed, taking over the victim's identity in the process. After they succeeded, the victim's mind and soul are destroyed permanently. Amihan took a deep breath. Even though the air was quite unpleasant in the surroundings, she had no problem as she could purify the air around them. Also, this altar is more complex to normal ones. The demon sealed here should be a very strong one. I just wish that this is not the altar that I heard about, or it will be hard for my lord to come back to us. Colleen slumped to the ground while Edsel gripped his fists tightly. While the three were feeling remorse for Mark's possible outcome, a child's voice was heard. Such impudence! His Majesty will not fall to such a filthy creature. It was miracle. It was not surprising for Amihan, but Colleen and Edsel were shocked to the unfathomable change that they saw. Aphelia, Amihan voiced. Little one, shouldn't you put more trust in His Majesty? Aphelia admonished in a strict tone accompanied by a glare. I'm sorry, will my lord really overcome this? I told you to put more trust, didn't I? With those words, Aphelia started working. Even though it could not be helped that her king had to lie on the ground, at least, she wanted to clean the surroundings. After all, the aftermath of her king's battle caused the surroundings to become unsightly. Day. Thousands of years ago, in a time unrecorded by history, a time where deities and lesser gods walked the earth, a time where spirits and elementals walked the land, often, tribes in the Philippines lived worshipping their gods while waging war against evil spirits, foreign usurpers and enemy tribes. Wars between tribes were a normal thing, especially when the chieftains of the tribes had things against each other. Most of the time, the losing tribe be absorbed by the winning tribe, while at times, it could also lead to the annihilation of the losing tribe if they did not want to submit. The causes of these wars could sometimes be a conflict with the hunting grounds, a conflict with the territory, or at rare times, conflict because of a woman or a contest for domination. Even inside tribes, infighting was common, especially when two men competed for a single woman. A duel for the sake of the woman was always seen as a way of courting them. At worst times, however, these duels of courtship could lead a war between tribes, killing many people in the process. Wars because of these causes were common at those times, but at very rare times, a war could happen. Just of the sake of bloodshed. Resentful souls of the innocent victims left negative energies at the place where their tribe was annihilated. This made those places uninhabitable according to the beliefs of the people during those times. At one time, however, hundreds of innocent tribe members were killed, causing a huge amount of resentful energy to gather in one spot. Thick malicious had drawn in a huge amount of evil spirits and demons to linger the area almost all the time. The dispersed energy by these creatures soon accumulated in the area and turned into miasma. Then, a formless demon was born. This formless demon forsook the area and wandered in the forest. For an unexpected event, the demon found the first human to possess. That human was wounded to a high degree and was almost dying. That person was the sole survivor of the massacred tribe that had been chased after the other tribe for a long time. As a new demon, it possessed the human and inherited the human's lingering resentment. During the time of the possession, the assailants found the human and tried to kill him for good. That was where the massacre began. The tribe that caused the massacre of the previous tribe was massacred in return. But it did not end there. All the tribes that had ties to the previous tribes soon followed its steps to destruction. As more resentful souls appeared, the man possessed by the demon became stronger and stronger. The negative energy birthed by the massacre caused the demon to grow. The demon soon gained an ego which it used to gather followers. Soon, he was worshipped as a deity of bloodshed. He used bloodshed and suffering of humans as entertainment. The victims were subjected to torture and their blood-curdling screams served as music to the demon's domain. Soon, the humans in his domain were eradicated after he turned them all into entertainment. Due to that, he started to put his hands in places he should not put his hands to. He left the mountains and started to spread bloodshed towards the tribes inhabiting the plains. With their domains and tribes worshipping them becoming desecrated, the true deities and lesser gods did not find it amusing. Especially the goddess of cultivated land, Ikapati, and her husband, the god of seasons, Mapulon. The two were lesser gods inhabited the plains at that time while teaching the tribes about agriculture. Many of the tribes that were attacked in the plains worshipped the two lesser gods and the ones they gave their gifts to. The two lesser gods retaliated, but it was too late. Not only that the fighting capability of the two lesser gods was low, but the demon had grown too strong. Although the cooperation of the two managed to defeat the demon and kill his vessel, they were never able to destroy its formless body. The two then sought the help of the greater goddess of the wind, Amihan, and they were able to seal the demon in the middle of the forest in a certain mountainous area. To keep the seal from being broken, it was placed under a spirit tree to provide energy for the seal, and a sylph, which was the kin of the goddess of the wind, was placed to guard the place. Soon, that forest became a forbidden place where people with evil intentions could not go back once they entered it. After several thousand years, the guardian had been replaced several times. Nevertheless, the tree remained the same and the seal remained intact. Suddenly, an unknown energy invaded the earth which affected the current guardian, the spirit tree, and the seal. A plane crashed near the spirit tree and the supposed to be dead humans from the plane shambled towards the tree and hugged its trunk like drunk people. Their bodies soon merged into a ball while exuding a faint stench to attract the animals around, which soon joined the disgusting ball of flesh around the tree. Due to energy in the ball of flesh, the guardian was never able to enter the spirit tree anymore and remained outside the tree for more than a month. Although it wanted to stay away from the disgusting ball of flesh, she was still the guardian of the altar for this generation. Fortunately, the spirit tree continued to supply the seal of energy it needed. Until the day came, the magical energy in the area was being sucked towards the east in large amounts. Dark clouds formed in the east as if it was going to rain very hard. As if the day that the earth was flooded would come again. Without sufficient energy, the seal started to weaken. In a panic, the current guardian forced the spirit tree to supplement the seal, causing it to weaken. Nevertheless, the magical energy continued to drain and the seal finally started to break. One of the stones in the seal cracked and the miasma started to leak from it. As the guardian, the sylph tried to confront the miasma, but she was unable to resist it. In exchange, she became the first casualty and was controlled. The miasma then seeped into the ball of flesh and the red lichen was created. The red lichen then spread out on the forest floor, which victimized more creatures in the forest and contaminated the northern part of the river. Nevertheless, the demon still stayed inside the seal. Being imprisoned for thousands of years weakened it far from being able to fully break the seal. It needed more sources of miasma to fully break the seal. Instead, it used the red lichen to gather more energy to corrode and convert to miasma. Asterisk 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 day. What is this? Where in the world is this? The demon bellowed. He watched the scenes of his own history flashing around him. He should have possessed the insolent mortal that confronted it and destroyed the physical body it chose to inhibit, but why did he end up in this place? Can you stop shouting, you piece of smoke? Your story looked similar to anime stories, so I want to watch more. The demon heard a voice which made it shiver. It then saw the insolent human who it should have possessed in unexplainable shock. Even if you don't seem to have eyes, don't stare at me like that. In any case, welcome to my world, you lowly demon. The mortal smirked while looking at the demon with his red glowing eyes. Day. Mark stared at the clump of miasma in front of him that made up the body of the demon's soul. The demon, the so-called deity of bloodshed, thought that it was his win only to see the flashes of his past in the surroundings the moment he came to. The demon totally neglected the fact that this could be a trap. This is impossible. How couldst a world liketh this existeth inside a myrtle? The demon bellowed with his shock. I can't understand all your words, but I guess I can tell what you're getting at. You know, every sentient living thing had something this. Every living thing that had a soul and intelligence had a world like this, the place where all their thoughts go to and the place where dreams originated. It was the world made up of the person's mind and soul. A world that could only be accessed when a person was dreaming. At times, the person would still be aware while inside their own world, and most people called that as vivid dreams. Most people, however, could only enter a part of their consciousness in this world, and that were the dreams most people easily forgot. As for Mark, however, he could enter this world due to certain conditions that he had before. First was because his imagination was very wild and vast in the first place. His overwhelming imagination could fit the criterion of being able to create a world in his mind. Second was because his body became inhibited by more than 2 sentient souls at one time. Unfortunately, both those souls were gone now. The third reason was the high compatibility of his mind and body to both psi-pathogen and mutagen, causing such mutation on his subconscious. The last and final reason was because he was a psychic. Even though this world existed in his subconscious and he was aware of it, there was no way for him to enter this world aside from one circumstance. It was when another soul would try to invade his body. This was the very same world where he and Freed met face to face for the first and last time. It was the place where Freed narrated and showed his story to him. Now, he was here once more because the demon tried to possess him. This was the demon's mistake. It was because in this place, Mark was the god. No wonder the demon seemed panicked. While Mark stared at the demon seemed to have noticed something and calmed down. Ha 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 ha. Very much interesting. However, thou art already expended. Even if t be true thee hast at this world, ter wast nothing thee can dith but becometh one with me. It seemed that the demon noticed that Mark was expended already, which was true. The fight they had outside expended a lot of energy from both of them. But with Mark's current state, he would not be able to deal with the demon even inside this world. To materialize things in this world, not only his imagination but he also needed mental energy. However, yeah, I'm expended. But who said that I have no way to recover myself? Mark smirked. Asterisk 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 day 44 to 9:48 p.m. San Marcelino, General Nakar, Quezon. Colleen and Edsel were already getting used to the entity inside Miracle ordering them. They built a tent, created a campfire and cooked food under her instructions. Edsel found it hard to believe, but Colleen accepted it easily. After all, she was also the same, someone with another consciousness inside her body. More than a half day had already passed and Mark was still unconscious. His body was still painted in black color and the black smoke continued to leak from his body. Fortunately, the black smoke was just a faint miasma which was too thin to affect them heavily. Nevertheless, it was still impossible for them to touch Mark without getting their skin corroded. While they were eating dinner rather late, a bright light shone from Mark's right wrist. Colleen and Edsel did not know what was glowing, but Emihan, Aphelia and the blood children knew of it. It was the psi crystal on Mark's wrist. As they watched the light, a mental crystal materialized above Mark. The crystal floated in place as it started to crack and turn into glittering powder that seeped into Mark's body. Asterisk asterisk. Done. Mark smiled as he gazed at the stupefied demon. Then, wherefore didst thee not death yonder liar? The demon spoke. Are you asking why I didn't try to recover earlier? Mark tried to interpret what the demon said by the demon's emotional fluctuation. You still don't get it? Do you think that I don't know that I didn't manage to kill you totally when I destroyed your large head earlier? I can fully detect you hiding at that altar. But if I tried to recover myself, you won't try to possess me for sure. Thee deceived this deity. Nah. It's strategy, you know. Also stop with the deity roleplay. You're a demon through and through. Thanks to that little sylph, I knew that I can't kill you with normal means. What I can only do is lure you here and destroy your soul. Mark remembered the possessed sylph. At her last screech, it was not an attack but her final lingering while trying to show him the things he needed to know. After that, however, there was no way for the sylph's remaining will to survive. This demon had no physical body and its existence was the miasma itself. However, one thing was for sure. It had a soul as a living being. Mark could only try and drag it into the world created by Freed's existence inside his subconscious. Thus, he feigned total weakness. He approached the altar in the thought of trapping the demon inside his body. It was a huge gamble that could harm him, but as Mark seen from both the sylph's will and the demon's past, the body of the person this demon tried to possess would not be destroyed by the miasma immediately even after it abandoned the body. That was what happened when the body of the tribesman the demon possessed was killed by the lesser gods. Ha 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 ha. Thee very much bethink yond, 'twill beest easy. If 't be true I died, the miasma shall destroyeth thy body completely even if 't be true thou art not human. Nah, once you died, the miasma will try to corrode my body because it became ownerless. In that case, it just needs to have a new owner, right? Hearing that, the demon found it both ridiculous and inconceivable. However, it could detect that Mark was not lying. Wherefore? Art thee not afraid of death? A demon's powers is something a mortal shouldst beest afraid of. A deity liketh me shouldst beest the source of feareth for immortals liketh thee. Wherefore doth thee not feareth? The demon bellowed with his almost incomprehensible language. Seriously, can you speak clearly? In any case I get you. Something like you should be feared by mortals. Even the spirits and lower deities should fear you. Then, wherefore? Because there is something way scarier than you. As Mark said that, he snapped his fingers. The scene around them changed from the aftermath of the demon's story to a place that seemed to be a wasteland. With the sudden change in the surroundings, the misty body of the demon wavered. When it looked at the scene behind Mark, it froze. Quite a distance behind Mark, an army of monsters marched forward. Behind them, a monster as tall as a mountain glared at him with its eyes that reached the quantity of 1,000,000. At that glare, the demon started to feel an emotion that it never felt before. Fear. It felt that it was staring at death. So, you can even feel fear. Mark smirked. With your prowess, you killed people, destroyed tribes and waged war with lesser gods. Mark then pointed his thumb over his shoulder towards the gigantic monster behind him. This guy behind me, however, it not only destroyed a whole civilization but a whole planet. Shoom. As Mark finished his sentence, a beam of light was released from the eye of that monster. The demon tried to flee, but with a snap of Mark's fingers, it froze in place and the beam tore through its body, which immediately reduced the density of its body. Gahhhh. The demon wailed in absolute agony. It was not a pain on his body after all but his soul. While the demon agonized in pain, Mark asked it a question. With this guy behind me, why should I be afraid of a mere demon? Shoom. 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 Gra. Millions of thin light beams flew towards the demon from the 1,000,000 eyes the monster had on its enormous body. It caused the demon to ceaselessly wail in pain. Until its wails lessened and finally vanished. From there the demon floated before, not a speck of smoke was left and it was totally obliterated. Mark turned to the psychic mutants and monsters behind him and sighed. I wanted to use robots or even use magic here, but you guys will do, I guess. I need to kill the guy as fast as possible after all. I don't have much time to waste anymore. Seriously, I wish I can use this world outside, but... Bam! Mark did not finish his words as he fell kneeling on the ground. The scene around him immediately vanished and became pitch black. It was the original appearance of this world, a blank one. He kneeled on the ground, gritting his teeth and clutching his chest. The miasma in his body became ownerless and started to rampage. It was several times more painful than the times he recovered his empathic ability and at the times he became an evolver. He felt like his body was going to tear apart. Nevertheless, he could feel that rather than rejecting the miasma, his body was trying to absorb it. He could also feel that the mutagen and psypathogen in his body was trying their best to make his body control the miasma. Still, with the pace it was happening, for sure, it might take several days or worse for this to end. He could not let that happen. Despite the suffering, he needed to hurry. If he had to wake up in several days, the people he wanted to return to would be gone already. It was a failure in his part. Even though the demon was severely weakened, he should not have underestimated its abilities. While in pain, Mark racked his brains for possible solutions. He could probably raise the amount of absorption of his body, but he would suffer even more. In that dilemma, an unexpected thing happened. He suddenly felt the miasma being reduced, which lowered the toll on his body. At the same time, he felt the existence of a certain physical crystal. He remembered this crystal. The ability inside it seemed to be turning a person into something like a chimera. He only saw the glimpse of this ability since he killed the guy as soon as possible, but he saw him having characteristics and abilities of several different animals. That ability belonged to one of the lackeys of the disgusting cougar from Death Valley Settlement. It was strange why a woman like that kept a lackey with this ability. It was quite confusing as to why this crystal would come out. Nevertheless, this was not the first time that a crystal moved on its own. Mark's eyes turned stern. It was the last gamble this time. The crystal floated towards his mouth and he swallowed it. The crystal immediately crumbled inside his mouth. He could not decide whether it was just his soul or his body outside really swallowed the crystal. However, he could feel the energy from it flowing inside his body. As the major details of the ability inside the crystal were drilled into his brain, his eyes widened. Damn. Why the F***ck is something like this existing in a toy boy? Mark could not help but swear before his consciousness drifted into nothingness. Day 47 to 12:23 a.m. Burnt Forest, San Marcelino, General Nakar, Quezon. It's already the third day. Colleen muttered while she sat outside their makeshift tent quite a distance from the acacia tree where the altar and Mark was located. She was keeping watch despite there was really no need to since Chaflar and the blood children were around. Edsel was the same and the two divided the watch schedule. It was Colleen's turn to watch right now while Edsel was sleeping inside the makeshift tent. The makeshift tent was just made of wood and leaves. At first, they tried to build the tent under the acacia tree after cleaning the area, but something happened that not only their initial tent got destroyed but everyone was forced to flee. Currently, a very thick and strong whirlwind of miasma was enveloping the area under the acacia tree with the unconscious Mark as the center. It all started about more than an hour after the mental crystal appeared and entered Mark's body. The surging miasma started small, which luckily made everyone able to flee. Well, almost everyone. One of the blood children was missing. Before the whirlwind grew to its current state, instead of fleeing like the others, Crimson jumped into the miasma, joining Mark inside it. At that time, Colleen, Edsel and Amihan were all worried about what happened. Among the blood children, it could be said that Crimson was one of Mark's favorites. If something happened to Crimson, it would hard to answer to Mark if he really passed this ordeal. Nevertheless, they could not do anything. They could not even see what was going on inside the wall of spiraling miasma. The strange thing, however, instead of getting worried, the blood children, at that time including Miracle, seemed to be cheering for Crimson. The three could not understand what was happening, and when Miracle was asked, she just pouted with obvious jealousy in her face, not answering the question at all. Without knowing what really happened, they could only wait. Even though they really did not know whether Mark was still alive inside that scary black energy, they still had to wait. It was because the Miracle said that her father was still alive. The blood children also seemed to be saying the same. As for the being called Aphelia, she returned to slumber without explaining anything to them. It was quite strange how they felt intimidated with a being inside the body of a child, but they could only follow her orders as if it was natural while she was out. That feeling was really strange to them. Still, it was already the third day after that happened. There was still no visible change with the whirlwind of miasma, which was really worrying. Since they found Mark, Colleen really had no time to rest properly. She was all worried, stressed and helpless. After all, Mark was not only their leader to her. He was her savior, not only once but twice. Carla's existence also relied to him. In fact, she could also feel that Carla was being restless inside her. In one way or another, Mark was an irreplaceable person to her. Colleen looked at her hands and sighed. Maybe, she started to understand why strength, not only normal strength, but overwhelming strength was needed in this world now. After all, although she was stronger than a normal human, she still needed to borrow Carla's abilities. Aside from that, she could do little. She could not even help in monstrous fights Mark experienced before. While she was contemplating about her weakness, rumble. The ground started shaking. From the surprise, she stood up, but the extreme shaking of the ground forced her down to the ground as she lost balance. What is happening? She could not help but voice out. Aside from her, Edsel and Amihan, who were sleeping, were woken up. Edsel managed to teeter out of the tent with great difficulty, while Amihan, who almost fell to the ground as she slept on the roof of the tent, managed to stabilize herself in the air. Miss Colleen, what is happening? Edsel asked, but of course, the person he asked also had no idea. At that moment, however, they saw Miracle and the blood children, that had no difficulty in traversing the shaking ground. Watching them, Colleen, Amihan and Edsel could tell that rather than fear or worry, they all looked excited. Shoom. Strong air blew into the surroundings, forcing Edsel and Colleen to shield their faces while Amihan was blown away. Amihan managed to stabilize herself in the air after Chaflar, that was resting where she was blown towards, blocked the incoming air with its wings for her. At the same time, however, Chaflar was staring at the whirlwind of miasma that started to spin fiercely. Despite their current state, Colleen and Edsel noticed the change in the miasma. While the whirlwind of miasma spun faster and faster, its radius reduced slowly. How long was it? All of them could not remember due to the spectacle. Maybe half hour or even an hour. They watched the whirlwind slowly reduce until it was just as wide as a concrete pipe used in city drainage systems and as tall as the acacia tree that should be about 4 to 6 meters high. Foom. Like a bamboo slashed in half by a samurai, the whirlwind was divided vertically. With the last burst of air, the miasma gathered into the center, forming a silhouette of a man, and vanished. The shaking of the ground and the strong wind also stopped. In the spot where miasma vanished, a man with tattered clothes stood holding a slime with both hands. They then heard the man spoke with that familiar voice. So, it's you, Crimson. No wonder the impact of miasma reduced drastically before. The blood child shook as if telling that he was worried about the man. In response, the man flicked its gelatinous body, causing it to jiggle. Seriously, don't risk your lives for me, will you? Well, it turned out good, so I'll let it go this time. The man smiled and patted the blood child gently. The man was obviously Mark, who finally woke up after the confrontation with the demon. His skin color had already returned to normal. No, rather, his skin became lighter than before. The black color that his skin had during the possession was gone, and instead, black chain-shaped tattoos could be seen on his neck, ankles and wrists. Although the chains looked like tattoos in the first look, staring at the tattoos would make anyone without tolerance to negative energies feel uncomfortable. Another change was his hair. Before, it was just neck long, but now, it reached the back of his knees. Furthermore, there was a streak of white hair just above his right eye. On his hand was crimson, the very first bloodchild Mark found. However, the red-colored bloodchild, with streaks of black on its body, was now different. It was still red in color, but the streaks of black had turned into smoke-like particles inside its body. He looked like a red snow globe with black smoke inside after the snow globe was shaken. Mark then turned towards to the southeast of the acacia tree. He saw a shadow of a child dash and jump towards him, which he caught firmly. "Father!" Miracle bellowed with a cute smile on her face. The very rare times she showed an expression like this was really precious. Following behind her were the blood children that lagged behind due to the difference in speed. Mark could only walk towards them and receive their welcome. As usual, the blood children clung unto him with great excitement. Alaula, on the other hand, bounced towards his neck and clung as he lowered his body. She was like a spoiled child clinging to her father. It was fine, but she was rubbing herself to his neck, which made him feel weird. Noticing his discomfort, Crimson on his hand made an unexpected move. Poof! Crimson's body dispersed into black smoke which surrounded Alaula. The clingy Alaula was forced off Mark's neck and floated down to the ground surrounded by the smoke. As Alaula landed, the smoke gathered together and Crimson appeared once more and immediately made a tentacle which it used to hit Alaula. In return, Alaula retaliated in the same manner. Mark saw what happened and was both amazed and helpless. Not only Crimson evolved but also became more intelligent. Looking at the two hitting each other, they looked like siblings bickering about small things. He immediately separated the two and put Alaula on his head while held Crimson on his right hand. Despite that, however, the two did not stop sending mental messages to each other and continued to bicker. Since it was just a bicker between two kids, Mark ignored them and made his way to the makeshift tent that was already almost broken. The other blood children were jealous about the treatment of Alaula and Crimson, but they could only follow Mark while bouncing behind him. "You all okay?" Mark asked the unkempt-looking Colleen and Edsel. The two looked dirty and haggard. They even had wounds on their bodies, especially Colleen. "My lord," with a crying voice, Emihan rushed towards Mark, even using her wind control subconsciously, since if it continued would end up with her hurting herself. Mark flicked his finger towards her direction. A small ball of black mist exploded behind her which erased the magical energy she was releasing and slowed her speed. "UWA, surprised!" Emihan yelped and lost balance in the air. Mark hurriedly put Crimson on the ground and caught her, of course. He then reprimanded her. "Be careful, will you?" "My lord." She seemed to not hear his words and cried in joy. Feeling the genuine joy she had, Mark decided to let it go. "Mark, boss." Colleen also started to cry in relief. Edsel was also the same, but he tried to hold his emotions back. "Look at you two. You two smell gross. Did you two not take a single bath?" "Just whose fault is it?" Colleen bellowed while wiping her tears. "It's already the third day, you know that." "All right, my bad." Mark bitterly smiled. "Wait, you said it's the third day?" Colleen looked at the military wristwatch on her right wrist and pointed at it while showing it to Mark. She then pushed the glow-in-the-dark button, revealing the time despite the darkness that was only lit by the campfire that was about to go off and Alaula's glow. "It's already past midnight, so it's the third day. You slept for 2 days already." Hearing that, TCH, Mark clicked his tongue. Even though he already used some countermeasures and even Crimson helped, but he still took 2 days before everything assimilated in his body. Well, at least, it was not more than a week or so, but the time was still tight. Because of Alaula on his head, everyone could see Mark's unsightly expression. "Boss, what happened? Is there something wrong in your body?" Edsel asked with concern. After all, Mark had just overcome a dangerous situation. It would not be surprising if even a little went wrong. "Nothing." Mark shook his head. You two ready our things. I get you two as yourselves and we will leave immediately. But Mark, it's just past midnight. I know, but we don't have much time left. We need to get to Bay City as soon as possible. Well, Mark, you're the boss here. Colleen replied, shrugging her shoulders. She might look like she was forced, but inside, she was rather happy to comply. While Colleen and Edsel tidied up the things around the camp, Mark approached Chaflar. You rested plenty already, right? I'm going to make you work hard this time. Growl. Chaflar flinched. Why is it different when it comes to me? The dragon thought. At this time, Colleen called out. Mark. What should we do about her? Colleen approached, bringing a rectangular uncovered box made of blood metal. Inside the box looked like a bed, and lying on the bed was a small girl with wings. She was the current guardian of the altar where the demon was sealed. As the guardian, her body was blessed to endure the corrosion of miasma, which allowed her body to continue living. Unfortunately, despite the body being alive, it was only an empty shell. Day 47 to 7:10 p.m. Seaside Road, Bay City, Parañaque, Metro Manila. Bang. Bang. Rat-a-tat-a-tat-a. Pang. Bang. A plethora of gunshots could be heard from the walls beside the gates as the bridge lowered at the southeast side of Bay City. It was to clear the wandering infected on the other side of the moat before the bridge was fully lowered. Behind the lowering bridge, a huge number of vehicles were waiting. It was a huge convoy composed of both military and civilian vehicles. The largest mission they had in the past was the Philippine General Hospital incident, and the number of vehicles at that time was not even a third of the number of vehicles this time. In the truest sense, this was the biggest movement the settlement had since the outbreak started. 3 days ago, unsettling information was disclosed by the military along with the announcement of a mission pertaining to that information. The information was about the Ninoy Aquino International Airport, or NAIA, which was just more or less 3 kilometers from the southeastern corner of Bay City settlement. NAIA, which was formerly known as Manila International Airport, was the largest airport in the Philippines. Compared to the 2 of the 4 areas in Bay City that was the Bay City settlement occupied, the whole airport was visibly larger. It was one of the 2 airports that serviced Metro Manila and also the most known airport throughout the country. Before the outbreak, it serviced millions of passengers with its more than 200,000 flights, both domestic and international, yearly. Now, however, not only the prestigious airport was vacated, it was overwhelmed by the infected. Since the outbreak started, NAIA was one of the places the military barely touched. It was due to various mild to serious reasons. First was because the area around the airport was densely populated. Not only that many commercial establishments that were populated could be found around the airport, but there were also several large areas where squatters inhabited. Compared to the actual residential subdivisions around the airport, the total population in those squatters' areas were way larger. Second reason was because risk-benefit ratio of going to the area was very low. It was a high-risk, low-benefit thing to do. Just wandering around the area could lead to annihilation than being able to take home that they came there for. Third, and the main reason, except for the high number of infected in the area, was that early in the first day of the outbreak, in order to delay most the infected from the southeast as they build the Bay City settlement, they bombed all the bridges, flyovers and highways that goes over Parañaque River. This river flowed from the north to southwest of NAIA and way south of Bay City and to Manila Bay. By bombing those designated places, they forced the infected to be stuck on the other side of the river at the area around the airport. Unless the infected at that time were able to traverse the deep river or climb over the walls at the riverside, they needed to go several kilometers north of the airport to manage and attack Bay City. That was rather both a good and bad move for the military. Good was because they succeeded in delaying early attack of the infected towards Bay City while they prepared the settlement. It was also bad, because it hastened the scattering of the infected into other areas like Bacoor, Cavite, which was just a few kilometers southwest. Not to mention that the military had to abandon all the survivors stuck on the area around the airport that could have crossed the areas the military bombed. There was also the fact that the military would also have a hard time to enter the area once again. Nevertheless, the survivability around the airport was very low. It was because the airport itself was one of the ground zeros of the outbreak. Back that day, 3 airplanes, 2 was in arrival while 1 was on departure, crashed into NAIA in 3 different areas. As such, the airport immediately fell into pandemonium. The emergency personnel of course came to the rescue along with the authorities, but as everyone could guess, it did not go well. Like in the movies, military immediately tried to quarantine the whole airport, but differently however, they failed to contain the situation. Not only that the squadrons of the military were spread out to deal with other ground zeros, but the highly mutated infected from 3 airplanes were way more than what the soldiers could handle. After that, the place was neglected by the military, although it could not be helped just by the fact that the military was mostly lacking in manpower. It was still a bad move. Since they had already scavenged most of the areas around Bay City for food, water and other necessities, they finally set their eyes on the untouched area around the NAIA. Like most procedures, they sent scouts to monitor the area first, both personally and using unmanned camera-mounted drones. That was when they saw the horrifying situation inside the airport at the expense of the lives of several scouts. The airport had turned into a hell in the surface of the earth. Millions of infected roamed the terminal and the runway. Flesh-like membrane could be seen like webs all across the vicinity of the airport, whether it be the walls or the ground. The parked planes became meat dryers as the bodies of the airplanes were also covered with the similar membrane. Long-term short, it was an infected nest way larger than Bay City settlement. Even the population of the two cannot be compared in quantity. Another thing the scouts found was the type of infected that they called Z-type, Alpha, the leader type, among other leader types. Thus, the military could not neglect it anymore and decided to prepare to take action. The military posted the announcement where they invited both free and private survivor groups to participate with a very high value of compensation. Furthermore, whether it succeeded or not, the compensation was still valid as long as they managed to survive the mission and made an acceptable contribution. With that, they managed to haul a large number of people to participate in this mission. Bam! The lowering bridge connected to the other side of the moat. It was finally time for everyone participating on the mission to depart. With mostly military vehicles in the lead, the vehicles drove out of the settlement with the sounds of gunshots in the background. Just behind the military vehicles in the lead, 3 non-military vehicles could be seen driving at the center of the group of vehicles. Those 3 vehicles obviously belonged to one large group as the 3 vehicles drove side by side. At the center was the very well-known vehicle in the settlement, the black armored MB Sprinter. ***, young miss, will it be okay? I still think that we should not participate in this. Odalina asked May, who was behind her as she kept her eyes on the road. May, who was patting the heads of both Iola and Abigail, who slept on the sofa while using both her laps as pillows, turned towards the front. I also don't want to, but we have no choice. General Perez is practically begging us to help. She replied in a helpless tone. That was right. Their group did not want to participate in this mission initially. It was due to the very fact that Mark was about to return and they only needed to wait for him before they go. These past days, they even spent their time doing nothing much but wait, except for the times that a small number of flying insects and animals attacked the settlement. However, General Perez begged them to participate. Still, it was not because he wanted to force them, but it was because more of those humanoid infected with wings were sighted at the airport. In fact, most of the drones the military sent were destroyed by those flying infected. Aside from May, they had no one capable of dealing with them efficiently. Those flying infected were more troublesome than birds or flies and mosquitoes. Infected flies and mosquitoes, despite their larger sizes, had not ability to lift a grown human from the ground. Due to that, their only attack pattern was to charge forward and bite while having an unstable flight pattern. At the time they were close enough, skilled people would be able to handle them, even normal soldiers. The humanoid flying infected, however, was already a pain to deal with, even with just their flight pattern. Not to mention that they would not slow down as they attack in uncanny angles and drag a fully grown human off the ground. They really needed May's help. Furthermore, there was also the pressure from other people. It was a wonder why those people started to exert pressure in the military, but since they also had high standings in the settlement, it became harder for the general to contradict it. Thus, it came to this situation. In exchange, General Perez promised to put them in a secure position with most of his elites around. After all, even the general was not comfortable with what was going on. While patting the heads of the two girls that had to wake up too early to prepare, May recalled the mission briefing. In this mission, the convoy would travel south through the Cavite Expressway. It was same expressway where she saw Mark for the last time before he was separated from them. Since it was impossible for the military to clear the fallen toll gate that blocked the center of the expressway, they would have to go through several private roads while fighting the infected. From there, the military planned to take Circumferential Road 5 or C5 Road. C5 Road was connected with Cavite Expressway and would lead them northeast. The road will pass right just beside the southwest wall of NAIA after traveling for about 5 kilometers or so of the road. From there, the mission would commence. The convoy would divide into several groups in which most will move as a distraction while the remaining would find a safe place to infiltrate the airport. Their mission was to destroy the nest and not kill all the infected, as it was dangerous. Not to mention that it was their territory. The people that would infiltrate all had stealth or agility type abilities, and they would hurriedly plant bombs inside the airport while the infected were distracted by the other groups. Once the bombs were planted, everyone would pull out, retreat and meet at the rendezvous point. For sure, it would be a long and tiring mission, but they all planned to finish everything before the sunset, or else everyone would end up dying. It was because this nest became more active during the night. As the convoy drove off from the sight of the people at the walls of the settlement, a shadow of a person could be seen above one of the buildings outside the settlement. No one from the wall was able to see the person due to the distance and the place the person was standing, but he could clearly see everything. Seeing that the convoy passed below the building the person was standing on, the person took out a radio and spoke. The person was a man with a rather raspy voice. The targets had already driven out of the settlement. They were in the most guarded position. What are your instructions? Just continue to monitor them and the others will do the other things. Keep in touch and report everything about the targets. A gloomy voice replied from the radio. Yes, sir. The man stored the radio and lifted his head, revealing bloodshot eyes. He then stared at the convoy while licking his lips, not in a creepy but a hungry manner. If one were to look at his eyes, however, the reflection on his eyes was upside down. As the convoy drove far, the man jumped from the building head first. Amidst his fall, however, the shape of his body started shifting disgustingly, and before he became a splattered meat below in the middle of the road, he turned into a large black bird with disgusting face and bat wings before he flew off. Tick tick tick. That sound echoed faintly as the strange bird flew following the convoy. Day 47 to 10:59 a.m. Circumferential Road 5, San Dionisio, Parañaque, Metro Manila. Along the C5 road, aside from the sounds of numerous vehicles, the sounds of gunshots could also be heard, which even overwhelmed the former. The large convoy from the Bay City settlement drove in consistent speed following the road. It was already almost 4 hours after they left Bay City for the mission, and they have even yet to pass the half of the distance they needed to traverse along C5 road. Although they were traveling in constant speed, it did not mean that they were going fast. Rather, they were already running late from their expected schedule. C5 road was one of the roads a large number of motorists travel through before the outbreak. Due to that fact, they expected to encounter roadblocks due to abandoned cars left by the victims of the first wave of infected. In fact, the military had sent a drone to see the state of C5 road several days before while planning the route they should take in this mission. The military knew of the roadblocks and thus prepared a dozen heavy vehicles. 9 were 10-wheeler dump trucks and 3 were backhoes. The trucks were equipped with 3 kinds of rams in front and shield-like bumpers behind. There were 3 trucks with each kind of rams. The first type was a V-shaped ram, the second were front-slanted rams, with the last was flat rams. Each type had different uses but was all aimed on clearing the vehicles that blocked the C5 road. Sure, The heavily vehicles were noisy, especially the backhoes, but each were necessary in this mission not only to clear the path but also transport the materials and equipment necessary for the mission. Since the roadblocks were within the calculations of the military, it was not the reason they were running late, the reason were the infected. To clear the path on the normal stretch of the road, it was fine to just let the trucks with V-shaped rams to lead the convoy and push the vehicles to either sides of the road while the vehicles continued to move. At the blocked intersections, however, where the vehicles were entangled with each other and at worst, crashed in difficult angles, the convoy must stop while road was being cleared. While that happened, the soldiers needed to clear the perimeter of the infected. That was where the problems popped up. There were more infected than what the scouts had reported before. The number was not overwhelming and could be dealt with proper planning, but the situation was still hindering the progress of the clearing. It happened several times in every places where the vehicles blocking the road were rather troublesome to remove. The situation felt strange, but since the infected wander around and their vehicles and guns were noisy enough to alert the infected in the vicinity, no one thought too much about it. Of course, all the participants in this mission found it troublesome, but nothing could be done but deal with the infected and move on. Also, there were a lot of mutated infected in the mix that were harder to put down, but with the overwhelming number of people in the convoy, they were more than enough to kill the mutated infected, and it only took more effort. Or not, currently, the whole convoy was stopped in a defensive formation at the entrance of the flyover in Carlos P. Garcia Avenue extension. The convoy was supposed to pass through the flyover, but the blockage of the vehicles at the entrance was heavier than the previous ones. The heavy vehicles, especially the backhoes, already started on removing the blocked vehicles, but it would take time. Going through the lower roads was not a plausible option for them, however. Not only that it connected to a nearby intersection that would lead away from their destination, but that intersection had far more heavier blockades of both public utility vehicles and private ones. Still, the clearing crew was in a severe rush. This place was not a residential area, but there were two malls in both sides of the flyover. Right now, the convoy was experiencing an attack from the infected from the two malls. Stalker here. Reporting, sir. That raspy voice could be heard as the same hooded man that turned into a hideous-looking bird was observing the situation of the convoy atop one of the malls. Stalker, what is the situation? The gloomy voice replied from the hooded man's radio. We are at point 5. The targets are still out of sight. It seems that Major Lopez is keeping them as reserve along with the elite soldiers. Phase 1 is proceeding smoothly, however. From their movements, none of them seem to suspect what is happening. Good. Shadow 3 and Shadow 4 should be around that area. Tell them to move to point 6 for the next luring. Continue observing the targets. After they pass point 6, commence phase 2. Yes, sir. The hooded man put down his radio and watched the struggling soldiers in amusement. Phase 1, the first plan of the scheme these people had. On C5 road, all of the blockades were natural and was untouched since the start of the outbreak. The number of infected, however, was not. Even in these two malls, the number of infected should not be this many after more than a month had passed after the outbreak started. Many of the infected had already wandered off, while most chased after the survivors at the first day. The current number of infected was lured by their group that was lurking in the shadows way before the convoy reached this area. And the purpose of Step 1 was to make the participants of the mission to waste as much resource as possible before the main part of their mission starts. It's unfortunate though. The hooded man took out a picture of the targets. Such beautiful people. For sure they will taste good, but it's a pity I won't be able to taste them. Hey. There's still the others left behind, I guess. Sir, better give me one. The hooded man licked his lips as he stared at the pictures. He was staring at the pictures not with lasciviousness, however, but like a hungry beast craving for meat and innards. With great difficulty, the entrance was cleared and the convoy proceeded, leaving the infected that had not stopped flooding towards them. Since the infected continued to chase while they drove on the rest of the road, the troops at the end of the convoy could only shoot them and kill as many as they could until the infected gave up. Of course, the infected would not give up and ended up with the convoy leaving hundreds of dead bodies along the road. The convoy still cleared up 2 more blockades, but for some reason, the last one had lesser infected. Everyone noticed it, but instead of suspecting, they could only sigh in relief as the previous instances already left them drained. At several minutes past noon, the convoy finally reached the southwest corner of the airport. Since what separated the vicinity of the airport from the roads around it was only a welded wire fence, everyone could see what was going on inside the airfield. Many felt their bodies shaking. It was hell. Although everyone had already seen the footage taken by the drones in the briefing, seeing the hellish scene personally had more effect to their psychological state. Almost the whole airfield was covered with the disgusting flesh film and webs that even reached the wire fences. Near the corner where they were, a vehicle of the airport police could be seen covered with the same disgusting matter. Despite the fear and disgust that swelled in everyone's mind, they already reached this far and could not back up anymore. They already reached the starting point of the mission. The best that they could do was to take deep breaths and calm their minds and hearts. With such atmosphere, the main part of the mission finally started. The convoy divided into 3 groups. One turned right from the intersection and followed the road, which was the multinational avenue to the west of the airport, while the other drove straight along the rest of C5 Road, which was at the south. The last group, which was the smallest one, stayed behind, hiding from the infected inside the airport. Of course, the infected inside and outside the airport was stirred after intruders were spotted in their territory. The fences were enough to hold back the normal infected, but the soldiers and the survivors still had to deal with the mutated infected jumping over. Of course, there were places where the fences were broken and the infected from the airport flooded out from those areas, not to mention the stronger infected that were able to bust through the fences. As the convoys passed by, more and more infected flooded the streets. More than 1 million infected was not a small number, and it could even be 2 million or more. Fortunately, the holes in the fences were too small to let all of them flood the streets in one go. This was also a good start, as the main goal of the 2 larger groups was to lure the infected out of the airport for the third group to be able to infiltrate the nest and plant the bombs to destroy it. Finally, the western group of vehicles reached the next junction, where a small street branched to the west side of Multinational Avenue. With several military vehicles in the lead, the vehicles at the tail of the group turned left and entered the small street. This caused infected following the group to divide at the same time. The nearest ones followed the vehicles that entered the street, while most of the infected continued to chase the main group. At the next intersection, the same thing happened, and a small number of vehicles separated and caused a large number of infected to separate from the majority. The same movement repeated at every intersection, and which caused the infected horde to scatter further. A large number of infected was lured away from the airport in this method. Of the western group, the heavy vehicles and a larger number of vehicles remained. They soon entered the vicinity of the airport, where the parking lots were located, and drove up another flyover that was directly facing the main parking area and the entrance of the airport. At the highest point of the flyover, all the vehicles stopped. The military vehicles at the tail turned to the side and blocked the road, while the soldiers immediately went down to assume defensive formation. The soldiers at the command center vehicle also went out, led by Major Lopez, who was leading this group. "Set up the defensive structures double time," Major Lopez shouted as the soldiers immediately took out the construction materials and equipment from the dump trucks and other vehicles. "How about the C4s? Major, sir, the infected on our tail is more than we expected. We can't plant it immediately." "Then move and clear them out. Use grenades and dynamites if needed." "Yes, sir." Soldiers ran back and forth following the commands issued by Major Lopez. Inside the command center van, the soldiers in charge of communication attentively kept connection and exchanged information with the other groups that separated from the main group. While the soldiers secured the perimeter of the flyover and started to build the defensive structures they needed, the people from the 3 vehicles they securely escorted finally went out. Major Odalina greeted with a slight bow. Behind her were May, Iola and Abigail, that were all ready to start their roles. From the other vehicles, Roland, Nikki and their other team members went down from their new armored jeep, while from the familiar armored transporter, RV, Jason and their team members also went out. After another half-hour of preparations, the metal bunkers were set up while the soldiers held their line of defense. It was then that the soldier in charge of communication shouted, "Sir, the other squads in position also finished with their preparations. Then tell them to commence the mission, now." Boom! An explosion was heard as the major commanded to start. The entrance of the flyover crumbled, creating a gap between the defense line and the incoming infected. Since the infected continued to flood, the ones in front fell on the gap. Several explosions could also be heard in other directions outside the airport. For sure, it was the same method to keep the infected coming but also blocking their way from the position of other squads. With the explosions as signal, the phase where everyone outside the airport needed to lure the infected inside out finally started. Day 47 to 12:16 p.m., Imelda Avenue, Parañaque, Metro Manila. Past noon, sounds of explosions echoed around the Ninoy Aquino International Airport. The more than a dozen explosions around the southern half of the airport where the main runway was located disturbed not only the airport but the whole district. After the explosions, the sounds of cement crumbling, buildings falling and uncountable gunshots echoed. Inside the airport, the nest was located at the very center of the runway where one of the airplanes crashed during the start of the outbreak. The military still had not figured out exactly whether if the crash caused the nest to exist in this place or not. However, it was lucky that the nest was located at the southern area and thus, they only needed to surround the vicinity of the highway to lure out the infected. If the nest was on the northern side or inside the airport buildings, the planning would be harder and they would not have enough people to create more teams to surround the whole airport. The flyover facing the NAIA Terminal 1 at Imelda Avenue, it was the location where the command team positioned themselves. It was a 4-lane two-way flyover that had about 4-meter vertical clearance underneath. This location had pros and cons in this mission, but with the bunkers being constructed, one of the cons was addressed to some extent. Since the flyover was rather high, unless the enemies were able to jump 3 to 4 meters high, it would be impossible to get to the people atop the flyover. Not to mention that the soldiers bombed the lower parts of the flyover facing the airport terminal, leaving the opposite side of the flyover as the escape route. Unless the infected was smart enough to more than 250 meters to the back of the flyover and attack from there, there would be no way for the common infected to reach the people above. And fortunately, infected in reality had no such complex AI pathfinding to be able to do that. Climbing. Some of the infected might be able to, but only to face the muzzles of the guns the people above the flyover had. All in all, the located was a very defendable one in this mission as long as they could manage to deal with the flying infected. Dealing with those, however, was the duty of the Team Fairy. WIIW. Boom. WIIW. Boom. The sounds of whistle rockets were heard from different locations around the airport. As the mission commenced, they had to attract as many infected as possible for the infiltration team to be successful with planting the bombs inside the airport. That was why after the explosions, fireworks were released by the soldiers. The sharp, shrill sound that came from the whistles of the rockets was proven to attract common infected. Not only the rockets but other sharp sounds could attract the infected more than loud explosion sounds. The scientists were still researching why, but the theory where these sharp sounds sounded more like shrills and screeches people let out when they were in deep horror was circling around. Quickly, as in very quickly, the almost empty roads outside the airport became a sea of horrifying infected. Even the elite soldiers were sweating profusely due to the overwhelming number of infected. If not for their advantageous location, this number was more than enough to overwhelm the whole squad several thousands of times. "How many are there?" A soldier holding the front line could not help but ask with a shivering voice. "Thousands, maybe 100,000? The soldier beside him chimed. "Don't think about the number. Just kill as many as possible." The captain overseeing the front line heard the two as he was close by and shouted. Firing their guns, not only the two but all the other soldiers concentrated on shooting. Although it was very unlikely for these infected to be able to climb up to their position, it was still better to kill as many as possible for many reasons. Flying infected at 11. A scout tasked of monitoring the vicinity yelled out, which made the sniper group move out. Along with May, the snipers faced southeast where the flying infected were spotted. Behind May were Odalina, Abigail and Iola as her support and guards. The moment they turned, they could see the infected immediately. May could not help but frown though. Odal, tell Major. The one that escaped from the previous attack in the settlement, it's among those flying ones. May spoke and aimed. Yes. Odalina immediately left to the command truck while behind her, the sniper gunshots echoed. Bang! Bang! The first volley of gunshots from the snipers felled the closest flying infected. It was not like before back the first attack of these humanoid flying infected. Back then, the military betted on the ambush to eliminate them. This time, however, the flying infected was faced with the snipers immediately, causing them to be unprepared even if their leader had some intelligence. After their comrades, however, the flying infected scrambled, flying like a group of bees disturbed from their hive. Young miss, the Major asked for you to concentrate on that one. Odalina came back and with the order from the Major. No need to tell me that. May answered with a frown. In that first volley, May was already aiming for that leader type. Those flying infected that fell down had nothing to do with her. However, the one she was aiming for managed to dodge in the last moment. Bang! Bang! May fired her sniper rifle in a speed no less than a revolver pistol. As her aiming time was shorter compared to others, she had no reason to time her shots with them. To her rare frustration, all her shots missed the target. However, the leader type also failed to advance further as it desperately dodged the sniper rifle bullets that seemed to have eyes and almost seemed to be following him. Asterisk asterisk. The Alpha had been located. One of the soldiers inside the command truck shouted outside, calling the attention of Major Lopez. The soldier, Technical Sergeant Spencer Oliveira, was controlling a camera-mounted drone he had launched at the start of the mission. Since the distraction around the airport drew out a lot of infected, especially the ones capable of flight, the drone made it above the nest in the runways safely. Inside the camera feed in front of him, a large flesh-like structure in the middle of the runway could be seen. It was over 3 meters in height and about 3 meters in diameter. It was like a large rosebud made up of fleshy matter. Beside it, a 3-meter-tall skinless humanoid monster was marching. Where is it? Major Lopez asked the moment he entered the truck. Sir, it is beside the central structure of the nest and don't seem to be attracted to the distractions outside the airport. The technical sergeant replied with a grave tone. Hearing that, Major Lopez's expression turned unsightly. This is bad. If it doesn't leave the nest, the infiltration team won't be able to plant the bombs. That was also my thoughts, sir, but what can we do? The people in charge of the command racked their brains. This was the first time they saw an infected ignore the provocation in their territory. In fact, even the smart flying infected came out, but the Alpha type seemed to have no interest of going out. If one of the distraction teams managed to lure the Alpha out, they would bail out from their location and lure the Alpha away. That was the first plan. However, in this situation, Major Lopez turned to the soldier in charge of the communication. Inform the infiltration to perform Plan C on the Alpha before they plant the bombs. The soldier's expression was stunned and became bitter. However, he could only nod. Yes, sir. The Plan C for the infiltration team, it was close to suicide. Since there was the possibility of infected not being lured out or being stuck inside the airport, this plan was thought out, which would likely prove the other term for the infiltration team in this mission, the suicide team. In Plan C, a small number of their members would split from the group and would lure the remaining infected from the nest. Since they had to personally lure them without the help of vehicles and without a safe defending position, it was close to suicide. There was no way that vehicles would be able to properly drive inside the airport in its current condition after all. Because the thing they needed to lure was the Alpha type, it was very likely that the people that would split from the main infiltration team would not be able to make it back alive. Huh? Technical Sergeant Oliveira, who was looking at the monitor, voiced out in confusion and hurriedly turned the camera of the drone. SHHHHRRRRRRRRKKKK. TWUB. The feed was cut off. What? The technical sergeant was shocked. What happened? Major Lopez, that had just turned his back from the technical sergeant, turned back once more and asked, "Sir, I don't know if I'm just imagining things, but it seemed that I saw people in the control tower." "Are you sure?" "Yes. I just saw a glimpse, but they seemed to be talking. I immediately turned the camera, but as you see, I lost the feed. It's very likely that the drone is destroyed." Hearing that, not only the major but the other people inside the command center truck felt strange. Day 47 to 12:42 p.m. Control Tower, Ninoy Aquino International Airport, Parañaque, Metro Manila. Tick. 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 That's close. We can't be careless anymore since the Philippine military already learned to use drones for scouting. The raspy voice sounded as a large bird with a disgusting-looking face flew into the broken window of the control tower. On the bird's claws, a broken drone could be seen. As it tossed the drone to the floor, the bird's body shifted and turned into a hooded man. Inside the control tower, 11 people could be seen, and if the bird that turned into human was included, there were 12. "Stalker, you're late." One of the men inside the control tower spoke while staring at the man with raspy voice. "It's good that I'm late, or this drone might have spotted you all. You all should be more aware of your surroundings." "Well, thank you." Another hooded man chimed in with a sarcastic remark which made Stalker glare at him. "Stop with the childish bickering and get in position." Another one spoke. As he seemed to have higher position among the others, they immediately stopped. Stalker walked forward and stepped on the larger gap between his comrades. Inside this room, 9 people had the same looking robes, and they stood in a circular formation at the center of the control tower. All the equipment inside had already been thrown out, leaving the vacant floor, which now was drawn with strange patterns and runes that looked like a magic circle. At fixed intervals at the outline of the circle were 9 smaller circles where the 9 hooded figures stood. As for the remaining 3 people, tears streaked out of the eyes of the 3 as their muffled cries could be heard. Inside the drawn symbol, 3 young girls about 15 to 17 years old were tied up and gagged while lying with their back on the floor at the center of the 3 major circles of the symbol. They were all crying in despair as they tried to struggle free from their bindings. They were wearing white one-piece clothing, and their bodies were obviously cleaned thoroughly. Girls as clean-looking and as beautiful as them would be hard to find in this apocalyptic world now. Looking at the 3 girls, Stalker spoke with disappointment. 3 virgin sacrifices. It's a pity I won't be able to taste them. The other 8 hooded men turned at him with stern eyes, and their superior spoke. "Stalker, stop with the nonsense. Well, start the ritual." Day 47 to 12:55 p.m. Control Tower, Ninoy Aquino International Airport, Parañaque, Metro Manila. While the soldiers and survivors from Bay City were struggling in their mission at the surroundings of the airport, the ritual of the shady people inside the control tower started. These people did not even feel the danger in the surroundings while staying in this place, which was supposed to be surrounded by the infected. Not just normal infected, but existence the military called the Alpha was also here guarding the nest. The eyes of these people were glued to the magic circle drawn with pig's blood mixed with different kinds of precious minerals and herbs. As the 9 hooded figures stood around the magic circle and surrounded the poor sacrifices, the tallest one spoke. "Est Deus in obumbratio, oceanum donus ferent numen ad caelum." The first phrase echoed. The drawn outline on the floor started to glow. Not a bright glow, but a dim and gloomy glow that seemed to be unexplainable to the eyes of the mortals. "Deprecondi humilitatem nostrum hic nobis, dona nobis conspectu tuo." As he told the second phrase, the hooded men slowly raised their arms and hands in praise. At the same time, the bodies of 3 women stiffened. Their eyes opened wide in horror. Their eyes were shaking and they wanted to continue to struggle. However, they could not move their bodies, as if there was a heavy pressure crushing their bodies from above. They tried to scream, but to bolster their despair, no voice would come out. Accipere nostra devotio, dona nobis benedictio tua. The tall hooded man continued the third and last phrase. Along with it, the overwhelming presence that could not be detected by mortals ensued inside the control tower. Even the hooded men felt uncomfortable. At the same time, the three sacrifices totally stopped moving. Their eyes rolled up in an impossible degree that it was obvious that the nerves in their eyes snapped. Blood flowed from their eyes like river, which was totally unscientific. Like tears, the blood flowed through both sides of their faces to the floor. Instead of scattering, however, the blood moved towards the lines of the magic circle as if the flow was being guided. It did not take long and all the lines of the magic circle were replaced by the blood of the poor maidens. Floosh. The whole magic circle and the symbols inside it bloomed into flames. Red flames that did not seem to emit enough light compared to normal flames. The 9 hooded figures stood in their position without getting phased. Even though the fire touched the ends of their robes, the flames never set their clothing ablaze. It was the same for the 3 maidens that were already at the verge of death. Burst. The chests of the 3 girls burst open, revealing their hearts that had yet to stop beating. 3 of the hooded figures positioned just in front of the girls took out 3 black-colored sinister-looking ceremonial daggers and moved towards the right side of each of the girls. They passed through the flames like it was nothing. Without batting an eyelid, they kneeled down and pushed the daggers into the girls' chests, precisely at their hearts with the choreographed movements. Finally, the hearts of the 3 girls stopped beating and the 3 figures returned to their initial positions and assumed the praising pose they had earlier with the same movements. Odd enough, no blood was spilled during the time the chests of the girls burst open and the daggers were pushed into their hearts. Instead, blood seeped into daggers as if the daggers were absorbing the blood of the girls, and the black-colored dagger started to have a reddish hue. The daggers were then set ablaze, but the flames did not seem to affect the dead bodies of the 3 girls. Instead, thick smoke came out of their bodies, and that smoke moved towards the center of the magic circle, forming what seemed to be a portal. However, it was not a portal to traverse but a portal to communicate. This ritual was not to summon something but to ask for requests in exchange for the sacrifices. They called it the ritual of evil blessings. Seeing the portal form, the 9 figures kneeled on the floor on both knees and lowered their heads to the floor. Swoosh. The portal opened and a pair of sinister-looking eyes could be seen on the portal that was filled with darkness. It had been a long time. The deep voice that could penetrate souls sounded from the portal. Raise your heads. Oh, Great One. Hearing the voice of the being behind the portal, the hooded figures finally raised their heads and praised while they kept kneeling on the floor. They watched the eyes on the portal in total reverence. The portal was very strange. It was both 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional at the same time. Even though the hooded figures were looking at the portal from different positions and angles, they could see the same thing. The Great One seemed to have noticed something. It seems that the surface is not as used to be. Great One, the world is currently infested with the soulless bodies moving about. It affects both mortals and the not. We dare not call the Great One out while not fully understanding the current situation. The tall hooded figure spoke. Oh, I see. The surface had become interesting then. No wonder the sacrifice is only enough to establish contact. The glaring eyes then panned on the lifeless bodies of the girls on the floor. Now, what did you all need? We beseech the Great One to empower the soulless ones in this place. Oh, is it to clean the filth in this place? Yes, O Great One. Then, it will be granted. As the voice fell, large amounts of black smoke burst out of the portal. The smoke even drowned the whole surroundings while evading the hooded figures. Day 47 to 1:15 p.m. C5 Road, Parañaque, Metro Manila. What is that? The position at the southern part of the NAIA noticed at first due to the lack of buildings in front of them. Even though the plethora of gunshots should have drowned the voice of that soldier that asked the question, everyone could not help but freeze as they saw the unnerving phenomenon. Black smoke as thick as clouds burst out into the sky. The smoke started to blanket the sky and was slowly spreading. Quick! Contact the command. The captain in this squad hurriedly spoke. However, Captain, we lost connection. What? The captain bellowed in confusion. What are you doing? Try the other frequency. Captain. All frequencies are not working. Even our handheld radios are not working properly. Hearing that, the captain took out the radio from his belt pocket and tried to use it. SHHHHHHHHHK. All he heard was white noise. The captain then looked at the sky. The smoke was spreading faster. His heart started to feel dread as he looked at the pitch-black smoke. May God protect us, he said as he grabbed the cross of the rosary tied up on his wrist. Day 47 to 1:11 p.m. Imelda Avenue, Parañaque, Metro Manila. Sir, all communications are down. The soldier in charge of communications bellowed in panic. Not only him but all the other soldiers were feeling even more restless. Albeit a little later, they could also see the black smoke spreading in the sky. No, rather than smoke, those seemed to be actual clouds. However, they did not carry rain and instead, the clouds seemed to carry death. The pitch-black clouds scattered faster and faster. It did not take long and the glaring afternoon sun could not be seen anymore. The bright day became a gloomy night as the clouds spread further. Soon, the clouds blanketed the whole area in and out of the NAIA. It did not end there, however, as everyone could feel something strange was in the air. Grrrr. GRRRROOWLLL. GRUUUUUOAA. The soldiers froze as they heard the spine-chilling growl in the background. It was as if someone hit the call the horde button in a certain game. They all turned to see where the growls were coming from and to their horrifying shock, all the infected below had their eyes glowing with an eerie red color. All the infected growled and roared at the same time while facing the sky. That was then that the soldiers and survivors saw the thing they never wanted to see in this outbreak. A literal sea and wave of infected as they wildly tried to reach towards the soldiers. The infected started charging in faster speeds, even jumping over each other and climbing over each other's body. As the seconds go, the infected started to make a ladder up to where the soldiers were, atop the flyover. Shoot! Shoot! Don't let them climb up, Major Lopez shouted to break his soldiers' stupor. Although he seemed composed, his heart was also pumping wildly. The feeling was even worse than encountering terrorists in the forests at the south of the country. Oh my God! What in the world is happening? A female survivor said as he stepped back from the edge of the flyover. She was shooting the infected below when she saw something. The skin on one of the infected burst, leaving its flesh in the open, its muscles then distorted and its bones bent. Soon, it transformed into an infected no one had seen before. The most horrifying part. It pierced its fingers on the foundations of the flyover and climbed up in a speed no less than a running cheetah. Ah! The survivor tried to shoot it, but the infected knew how to dodge while climbing. Due to the uneven shape of the foundation, the woman lost sight of the infected. It was then that her assault rifle was gripped with a hand without skin and was pulled away from her. The assault rifle fell down the ground below the flyover and the infected climbed over the road barrier before jumping towards the woman. Bam! Sizzle! Fortunately, a barrier formed in front of the woman. The barrier protected the woman and slowly corroded the splattered body of the infected. Bam! The skull of the infected sunk in and its neck was bent in an unsightly angle as a bone-armored arm punched the infected's head. After the infected flew away from the impact with a bent head, the barrier vanished. "Are you all right?" Odalina asked as she helped the woman stood up with her free hand. "Thank you. Thank you. It's fine. Get another weapon, it's not over yet." "Why yes. IWIA." The female survivor was not able to finish her reply as she shrieked once more while pointing at a certain direction. Odalina immediately entered a battle stance when she froze in shock. The one that the female survivor was pointing at was the infected she had just killed. Or, it was supposed to be. With a bent neck and sunken skull, the infected stood up like it was nothing. It then charged back towards Odalina and the woman once more. Bam! Odalina punched the infected once more, causing it to fly back like the last time. Its neck was not just bent anymore, but its head dangled on its neck. It should be dead by now. But it was not. It stood up again and charged forward. This is bull. The always polite Odalina could not help but let out a simple swear seeing the infected in front of her. For another time, she attacked the infected and punched it on its chest. The infected's chest sunk in and was pushed over the rails, causing a disgusting splatter sound below. Was that the end of it? Odalina hurriedly checked. To her horror, however, the infected's body was all broken and the fall might have totally broke its spine. However, with just its remaining right arm and 2 legs, it started to drag its body towards the foundation of the flyover. Fortunately, it was unable to climb up once more. Still, this was a thing of hell. The moment Odalina turned away from the scene below, she could not help but feel shocked. That infected was not the only one. There was already a dozen or more infected on the flyover with bent necks, gunshot wounds on their heads and even exposed smashed brains. And yet, they were still moving. This time, the mission issued by the military became a true fight for survival.